our series, colloquium series on California's water. For this fall semester, this is our second lecture. We have two more. In November, we have an interesting situation. We normally have these lectures on the second Tuesday of each month. But it turns out that the second Tuesday of November is a holiday, so we will have it on the following Tuesday. So today we have something from the social sciences and engineering combined together about how we human beings in California would like to divvy up Colorado River's water along with all the other western states who are competing for this resource. And today's speaker we are very, very fortunate to have somebody who knows this business of Colorado water extremely well. Mr. Tom Levy, who for 30 years was involved with part of the Coachella Valley Water District, and then since 1986 he was the chief of the Coachella Valley Water District. He is going to be our speaker, and he has had his engineering training starting with UCLA, where he got his bachelor's degree. Then he went on to USC to get a master's degree in civil engineering, and then went to Loyola College and got a master's degree in environmental engineering. Then he has worked with the Coachella Valley Water District almost his entire career. Water is very precious in that part of California for agriculture. Every drop has to be used with great deal of care. And today he is going to talk about a topic which has been, for the last couple of years, which has been very much in the press and the public's mind, how we are going to share the Colorado River water. And there is a lot of emotion involved in it, as it is reflected in the title of today's talk, A Paranoid's View of the Colorado River. Mr. Levy.
Good evening. I appreciate being invited here. It's nice to have an opportunity to talk about a subject that I've been involved with. At times, I think I lived through the last 100 years of it, because on the Colorado River, more than I think most rivers, history controls what happens today and what will happen in the future. And so I think it's important to go back and talk a little bit about the history of the Colorado River so that you can understand why we did some of the things we're doing today and how we're going to solve problems at some point in the future. So if you roll yourself back to the early part of the 20th century, you have a situation where the courts created, prior to 1920, two basic, either created or adopted, two basic concepts. One was something called Indian Reserve water rights. And these are water rights that the courts decided that when the Congress created an Indian reservation, they intended on providing water for that reservation. And even though they may have said nothing about it in the documents creating it. And what the problem with this is that these rights are not lost like normal water rights, because you don't lose them through non-use. If you're a non-Indian and you have a water right and you don't use it for a period of time, you lose that water right. The Indians don't have that problem. So as new development takes place, the Indians are in a position to put their water to use, and they have a priority as of the date of the Indian reservation. So we have this situation floating out there, and the Navajo recently have filed a lawsuit asking for an adjudication, and their claims at times have been more water than all the water that exists on the Colorado River in there. The second doctrine, or second legal doctrine, is the doctrine of prior appropriation. That is the person that first puts water to reasonable beneficial use has a right to it, and it's a senior right over another person who uses the water later. It's known by many as the first in time, first in right. And so at the same time these two rights were being really brought to the forefront, the land speculators and agricultural interests in Arizona and California started using Colorado River water. In the Palo Verde Valley, which is where Blythe is and usually shows up as the hottest place in the nation in there, and also a great place for water skiing. In 1877, they put diverted water from the river and started farming. Imperial Valley, in 1901, a private company constructed a canal through Mexico and delivered water to the Imperial Valley for farming. By 1920, there was almost 1 million acres in agriculture in the Yuma area and in the Imperial Valley. And they were diverting 3.5 million acre-feet of water in Arizona and Nevada from the Colorado River. So there was major development taking place there. Under the doctrine of prior appropriation, the other basin states were concerned that California and Arizona would put all of the water or all of the usable water on the Colorado to use. And they were paranoid about the fact that when they got ready to develop, they would not have any water available to them. And they still are paranoid about the fact that they may not have water in there. So they were interested in somehow trying to limit the use of water by the lower by Arizona and California and protect their rights. At the same time, the farmers and people in using the California desert and Arizona desert for agriculture were concerned because in the spring they would have massive floods down the Colorado River, and then come fall and winter the river would go dry. They didn't have enough water to be able to divert and keep their crops going. So they were interested in getting a dam built on the Colorado River so that they could store the water and have water for year-round use. And the farmers in Imperial Valley found out that an a canal through a foreign country, Mexico, probably wasn't the best thing in the world. That when there was a drought, they found that the Mexican farmers took the water. When they had maintenance problems, they had to work it out going into Mexico. Imperial Irrigation District is probably the only water agency in California that had its own armory and uniforms, and when they had when they had problems in Mexico, they went out and hired people and went across into Mexico and protected their facilities. And every once in a while there'd be a revolution and they'd try to hold the canal hostage. So they wanted what they called the All-American Canal. So they were interested, the dam and an All-American Canal were what they wanted in there. And then some visionaries, one of whom was William Mulholland, had finished bringing water from Owens Valley, but they had a vision of a greater California. And so they looked to the Colorado River as the next place to bring water from. So by 1920, or early 20s, this diverse group of people decided that they wanted to get some method of allocating the water among the various states. And so they petitioned Congress to authorize a compact between the 7 basin states. And in 1921, it was authorized that they could negotiate. They then negotiated for the next year and a half or so. And in 1922, came to an agreement. Herbert Hoover, who at that time was Commerce Secretary, led the negotiations. He took them up to a little place outside of Santa Fe that at that time was fairly isolated. He could kick out all the hangers-on and had just a small group that he could work with. And they came to a deal. They could not end up with a division for each of the basin states. So they punted and went to a division that had only the upper basin states, Wyoming, Utah, New Mexico, and Colorado, they got a block of water, and the lower basin states, California, Arizona, and Nevada, were to receive, they became the lower basin states, and they received the first 7.5 million acre feet that was available. At that time, they thought the river had about 18 million acre feet of water in it on an annual basis. That was based on a wet period data. Today, we think the long-term yield is about 15.1 or 3 million acre feet less than what it was, what they thought it was, and what they were in their minds dividing up. So, but if you go back and look, they failed to achieve their objectives. What they did was protect themselves, the upper basin, from the lower basin, or so they thought, and then felt the lower basin could fight over the issue. At that time, Nevada was a non-issue. The state of Nevada had almost no usable farmland, and so the governor in the 30s, after the Boulder Canyon Project Act was passed, went around the state telling everybody he had snookered the rest of the states because he had gotten 300,000 acre feet of water for them. This year, Nevada, southern Nevada, will divert about 320 to 330,000 acre feet of water. They're over their entitlement of water, and they're having to look for new sources. Okay? The compact was just one of many deals where the people involved weren't able to solve the problem. So they came up with a temporary fix, one that gave them time to pass the problems on to somebody else 20 to 50 years later and let them go on with their life for a period of time and meet the short-term needs that they had. Once the compact was signed by the states, they had to get congressional approval. Arizona, whose negotiators signed the compact, went back and almost immediately got killed and was replaced by a person who hated the compact and thought Nevada had been cheated, or Arizona had been cheated. And so Arizona opposed the compact, and the California and the other states tried to get it ratified and were not successful until 1928, when Congress passed the Boulder Canyon Project Act. And it provided an alternative method for California, or for the basin states, to come up with or approve the compact without Arizona's signature. What it took was California to agree to limit itself in normal years to 4.4 million acre feet in there. A normal year is a term of art on the Colorado River. We have surplus years, normal years, and shortage years. We've never had a normal year until about 2 years ago when we had one because California or the lower basin states were limited to 7.5 million acre feet, and we've never had a shortage year. And one of the reasons we've never had a shortage year is that there is about 60 million acre feet of storage capacity on the Colorado River. About 4 times the flow of the Colorado River is in storage so that you can meet droughts in there. Now what happens in the future, we won't know. Global warming may have an impact on that. But after the compact was ratified, then California was faced with a difficult problem. It had to figure out how it was going to solve its problem and divide up the water among everyone who wanted water from the Colorado River. So there were several attempts to do that. In finally 1931, the California parties divided up the river, the California 4.4 and more. What they did is through political hardball, the agricultural agencies got the first 3.85 million acre feet of California's 4.4 million acre feet. And Metropolitan Water District, which was formed to provide water to coastal Southern California, got 550,000 acre feet. You add both of those up and you have 4.4 million acre feet. But being water people, we proceeded to go ahead and divide up even more than that. We gave Metropolitan in San Diego another 662,000 acre feet. We gave Imperial and Coachella and the Palo Verde Mesa lands another 300,000. And then for just good measures, we said anything that's left goes to the ag agencies. So you look at it today and you say, why did they divide up more than 4.4 million acre feet? Just doesn't make any sense, except for the last 60 years, we've had the ability to use more than 4.4 million acre feet. Metropolitan was so enamored by the fact they got 550,000 of firm water that they went out and built an aqueduct that is capable of moving 1.3 million acre feet, or over twice what their entitlement is in normal years. And over the years, they've gotten where they've actually delivered that much water, and they're delivering it to people rather than to farms, and people don't like being fallowed in there. So you look at it and say, why did they do it? It worked well. We had 60 years of no problems, no real problems on the on water supply for California. Oh, and when we divided it up, you know, we're a little not good at math and not good at counting people around the table, and so we left off the people like Needles, who were a town on the Colorado River and using water. We left off the Indians, who have present perfected rights for the water. And so the 4.4 is actually less than that when you add it in. Well, the ag agencies weren't able to divide up the water among themselves. So we came up with a convoluted priority system. You had Palo Verde Irrigation District as the first district in priority, and they got a right to use water put to reasonable and beneficial use on their lands. And then, and that was because of their early date in starting diverting water. You then had the Yuma project in California, and they got water to use on their lands, and a limited amount of land. And then Imperial and Coachella got the rights to use water, the remaining amount of water on their lands, with a little caveat for a little piece in the Palo Verde Mesa. But we have this system where no one had a water right. That was fixed, and everyone had an incentive, especially lower priority people, to fight over the water. In the beginning it wasn't a problem because no one was using water, and everyone had all the water they could get. But we weren't able to come up with it. Again, the ideal thing in 1931 would have been to solve the problem and give everyone a defined right. In 1933, 1934, they were starting to build the All-American Canal and its Coachella branch. The Secretary of Interior was in the pocket of Imperial Irrigation District at that time, and Imperial got the Secretary to require that before he would sign a contract with the Secretary, or with Coachella, that Coachella had to agree to settle its differences with Imperial. And so Imperial made us accept a lower priority for water put to reasonable and beneficial use in a specific service area in Imperial Valley. You'll hear that come back in 60 years or 70 years when we started using up that water. So you have this situation where we solved problems for the short term. And then what did we do? We moved forward and didn't have a whole lot of problems. We had minor issues like Arizona v. California that went to the United States Supreme Court. We had issues with the other basin states. We had a treaty with Mexico, all of which had to be negotiated out in there. But for the most part, it was what they call the peaceful years. The biggest probably issue in there was the Central Arizona project. And the reason Arizona filed the lawsuit in Arizona v. California is Arizona wanted to build a pipeline similar to Metropolitan's that took water from the river over to Tucson and Phoenix. And every time they'd go to get federal legislation and federal dollars, California would whisper in the people's ears in Congress, well, there's no water for it. And so Arizona felt it had to prove up its water right and filed the suit. California had a secret plan that they said where 4.4 million acre feet that the California legislature had agreed to be limited by, and the contracts all had in it, really didn't mean 4.4 million acre feet, but meant something more than that. And so it took the Supreme Court to tell us in California that 4.4 meant 4.4. Now the scuttlebutt was that before they adjourned the summer, before they came out with their decision, that they'd taken a poll and decided that they were going to find in California's favor. When they came back, something changed, and they found against California, and California knew at that point in time it was going to be limited to 4.4 million acre feet sometime in the future. But no one was using water at that time, so it wasn't any real short-term impact. Interestingly, during the Arizona v. California case, Imperial IID showed tables that showed they would use all of the California ag entitlement other than what Palo Verde and the Yuma project used. They showed a column for Coachella and showed zero. Needless to say, that shocked the then general manager, who went back and proceeded to say, we have to operate differently. We have to put water to efficient use. We can't continue to be wasting water like Imperial. So the district changed its method of operating in there. When they built the All-American Canal, water was less valuable than concrete. They ran it through the sand dunes down by the Mexican border, and they did not effectively line it. So the two canals lost about 230,000 acre feet of water a year. That's enough water for about 2 million people in the urban setting. In the early 1980s, 1970s, as part of a settlement to meet the Mexican treaty obligation and a minute that was negotiated on salinity, the Coachella Canal was lined to save 130,000 acre feet of water. When you go to the 1980s, this was a time period that the Central Arizona project had been authorized, it was under construction, and we actually thought by 1985 it would be in service and California would be limited in there. So the California agencies tried to figure out what do they do. If you look at Imperial's water use, over 1 million acre-feet flows off the fields of the Imperial Valley and into the Salton Sea. And that is about 1/3 of the water that Imperial diverts from the Colorado River. And that's the major source of keeping the Salton Sea full and resulted in flooding around the sea and damage to homes there. The IID's waste of water was known from the 1950s, and in the Arizona v. California case, the special master took special recognition of the waste and said when California is limited, they will have to make better use of that water, that they couldn't afford to let it go forward. In the early 1980s, the State Water Resources Control Board did a evaluation of IID under California law, and they came to the conclusion that IID was wasting water. Technically, what they said is if IID didn't find someone to do a transfer with and reduce the amount of water they were wasting, they would find them in violation of the California law. So we went from there. In 1988, Metropolitan, recognizing they were going to need more water, wanted to line the remaining portions of the All-American Canal and Coachella Canal, and that would save about 100,000 acre-feet of water. Well, my IID wasn't interested in doing that unless they got paid a significant price above the cost of doing the work, and that they wanted the ability to take the water anytime they wanted at no cost. Coachella was interested in the lining because it would bring some operational efficiencies to us and give us better water delivery capability. So Met and Coachella teamed up, went to Congress, and got the canal lining authorized. Unfortunately, we ran into a roadblock. We got hijacked along the way by a band of Indians in the San Diego area, a couple of public agencies in the same area, and a congressman from the Central Valley. The city of Escondido and Vista Irrigation District had been fighting with the Indians for about 40 years over 16,000 acre-feet of water. Well, they decided they'd stop fighting and they'd go steal water from somebody, and their first group was to look at the Central Valley project. Well, unfortunately, we were going through Congress about the same time, and a congressman from the Central Valley slipped in a little change and made it where the water was to come from any place but the Central Valley, and specifically he talked about lining the canals. Of course, being a good congressman from a different area, he didn't put any money in to pay for it. So we ended up with the ability to spend our own money to line the canal, but not with the right that we would potentially lose some water. Just as a side note on my paranoia, the congressman that did that, when he retired in 2000, slipped a bill in a budget rider that came out of a conference committee to give the same group free power, or low-cost power, essentially free power, and a permanent right to the 16,000 acre-feet from the canal lining. So we were faced with an even bigger issue. Just by the quirks of politics, the bill got vetoed And our price for letting it go forward was they had to forgive about $35 million worth of debt that we had from lining the first portion of the Coachella Canal. People that are your friends, all of a sudden, when they were doing that, you wouldn't return your phone calls. You're trying to figure out what's going on, and it makes you a little bit paranoid in there. Okay. Also in 1988, Metropolitan and IID, the same time we were working with Metropolitan on lining the Coachella and All-American canals, entered into a program to line the in-valley canals, to install small reservoirs, interceptor systems, and on-farm tailwater return systems to save about 110,000 acre-feet of waste that flows to the Salton Sea and transfer that to Metropolitan. Metropolitan we consider to be one of our best friends, but they didn't see anything wrong with going around us. They didn't come talk to us, and they just had one problem. They had not recognized or thought they were going to roll over us under that the seven-party priority agreement and the compromise agreement would prevent the water transfer. So we spent about a year negotiating where Metropolitan and IID finally agreed to give us about 50,000 acre-feet of water of the 110,000 for us to use anytime that the ag agencies were limited in there. So an issue that wasn't a problem in the 1930s became a problem in the 1980s. One of the strange things when you look at the effects of the IID MWD transfer was the increase in California's water use in there. Before the transfer, IID's 10-year average water use for the preceding 10 years was about 2.71 million acre-feet. If you look at their water use since then, it's increased by 600,000 acre-feet. Yet they're farming the same amount of farmland in there. You know, a paranoid just might think that it wasn't coincidental that that happened, that somebody saw a value to water and a chance to make a buck in there. Okay, after the IID Metropolitan deal, Coachella and IID had many discussions about how we try to resolve our conflicts. Coachella wanted a firm water supply, IID wanted the ability to sell water. But we always had the problem that IID wanted to sell water to Coachella if we were to get a fixed amount of water. Coachella felt that we were entitled to the water that they were wasting at no cost. So our first attempts failed. The Department of Interior and Bureau of Reclamation recognized that they needed to quantify the agricultural agencies, and they worked with the ag agencies in 91 and 92, trying to get us to agree. Needless to say, we weren't able to, and the Bureau in 1992 came out with their proposal in December of 92. They proposed to give Coachella about 370,000 acre-feet and would give Palo Verde and the Yuma project a little more than what they had currently been using, and they cut IID significantly in there. But they gave IID the right to use any water that wasn't used by the other ag agencies. No one was really enamored with their proposal. Coachella was willing to go along with it, but Imperial didn't like it and refused to go along with it. The proposal came out in December. In January, the Clinton administration took over, and Bruce Babbitt became Secretary of Interior and wanted some time to look at that. And so the first Bush plan went nowhere. In the late 1980s and 1990s, Coachella was running around the state telling everybody that IID was wasting water, and we had some very colorful displays at water conferences and arguments in the newspapers in there. The best one was at one of the conferences, we had a booth and had a TV tape with one of the IID directors in a crude cutout with somebody else's mouth behind it, telling the story that what do you do if you have Tom Levy and 2 terrorists in a room and you only have 2 bullets? You shoot Tom Levy twice, was the punchline in there. So we had some good times in there. We'd go out and have dinner together after we'd have arguments in there. But in the 1990s, probably about 93, 94, the Bureau got tired of all the cheap jokes and said, okay, Coachella, Imperial, you need to sit down and figure out what we're going to do. We're going to settle who's wasteful and who's not once and for all, and that was by putting together a panel with agricultural experts selected by each of the agencies and the Bureau of Reclamation. They did a 2-phase program. They did the first phase, came out with the results, and wanted to do the second phase. And what did they do? IID said, no, you want to actually go on our fields and do measurements instead of just looking at paper data we generate, a little like when I was in college in dry labbing. IID refused to let the Bureau do it, and the whole attempt died. After that, the Bureau looked at it and said, we need to do something, and so they hired an agricultural expert to go in and evaluate IID's water use. At first, they did it without IID's knowledge. His first report came out in 1995 and found IID was wasting water. Naturally, Coachella wasn't surprised, but IID claimed they weren't and submitted a whole bunch of comments. Over the next 7 years, the Bureau redid the report about every 1.5 or 2 years, responding to all of IID's objections, and the results were always the same, occasionally a little worse. IID was wasting water. Have you ever done something and you think it's right, and then it goes bad, and you thank yourself that it doesn't? Maybe in there. In the 90s, IID and Coachella almost settled their differences. We had a settlement that we had worked out. We'd spent months working on negotiating around. Coachella was going to pay IID some money, but it wasn't as much as MET was, and we were going to get a fixed amount of water. And it wasn't the best deal, but we all thought we could live with it. At the last minute, one of the IID directors convinced his board that they could get more money from Coachella. And we were, by that time, a little lukewarm on the deal. I guess we had sobered up from the champagne or something. And so we went, and they came up to my office and laid their new proposal on us. We caucused and came back in 5 minutes and thanked them for coming up and sent them on their way. And the IID director who had suggested it looked a little shocked as he was walking out the office in there. It turned out to be a blessing for us in that we were in the process of determining the overdraft in the Coachella Valley at that time, and the number that we had agreed to accept was lower than what we needed to solve the overdraft. So just one of those things that we were lucky that we got protected against ourselves in there. In 1994 and 95, a new player entered the picture. the Bass brothers, some Texas millionaire family, bought about 40,000 acres, or roughly 8% of the farmland in the Imperial Valley. They paid about $60 to $80 million for it, and they were telling people they were going to bring some of their cattle from Mexico up and fatten them on the fields up there. Didn't really play in a farm community that knew that they weren't telling them the truth in there. They did everything they could to, from the book of how not to win the community over. And the community reacted very violently to it. But the Bass brothers had an unrealistic idea of what water was worth. They tried to sell the water to Metropolitan Water District at about $400 an acre foot, when Met was buying water at the same time at $125 an acre foot. So there wasn't much interest there. They then approached the San Diego County Water Authority and offered to sell either the water or the land. The authority took a long look at it and ultimately decided to pass. But it set in motion the idea in San Diego that they could get water from Imperial Valley. During the period that the Bass brothers were trying to sell the water, Coachella met with them, and they proceeded to tell us how we had no rights, and they had the political muscle, and they were going to roll over us. Naturally, we didn't agree, and a little while later, the Bass brothers sold the land to U.S. Filter. U.S. Filter Bass brothers did very well. They took their $60 to $80 million investment, sold it for about $240 million in stock, and proceeded down the road. U.S. Filter had a novel idea. They proposed to clean up the water out of the drains in Imperial Valley that flow to the Salton Sea, take that water, put it on the farmland they owned in Imperial Valley, and get a like amount of water that they could sell. Unfortunately, that didn't get around the water rights issues, and they never got a buyer for that. U.S. Filter, for other reasons, merged into Vivendi, and now the French company owns about 40,000 acres in the Imperial Valley, and I'm sure any of you that have some loose change can probably get a pretty good deal on it. After that, the basin states, the lower basin states, were trying to figure out how to solve some of their problems, and the concept of having a mediator came up. And so we did, the basin states did some looking around and selected a Middle East peace negotiator named Abe Sofair. And his claim to fame is that he was one of the only two people who had ever gotten the Israelis to give back land. He and Henry Kissinger. Henry got a fair amount. I think Abe got 20 acres or something. But Abe was a very impressive facilitator. And so the California parties, after the lower basin states decided they weren't going that way, hired him to try to assist the agencies in working out a settlement. We never got to the hard issues. Abe liked to put together beautiful documents with great prose in them, but we never got to the hard issues of who got how much water and what did it cost. And so that process ended up just fading away. But after the Bass brothers had approached San Diego, they got together with Imperial, and in 1995 worked out an MOU that said they were going to talk about doing transfers. And San Diego is a bit paranoid. They see themselves as the stepchild to Los Angeles, that Everything is done LA's way. The big shipping port, the big airport, everything's in Los Angeles, and San Diego is second fiddle. In the water world, it's the same way. Metropolitan has the contracts for water, and San Diego is a buyer of water from Metropolitan. They're the biggest buyer from Metropolitan, but San Diego was concerned about how Metropolitan shares water in droughts, and they wanted their own independent supply. So they worked out a deal with Imperial. They were going to come up with, Imperial was going to come up with about 300,000 acre-feet of water, and San Diego was going to buy it at a price starting at about $250 an acre-foot, and it'd be for a 75-year term. San Diego had two minor problems. The first, Coachella claimed it had a right to any water that Imperial wasn't using, and it was clear that the water wasn't being used in Imperial's service area, as San Diego wasn't part of that. And so our position was that we could take the water for free. Second, there was only one pipeline coming from the Colorado River to coastal Southern California, and that pipeline was owned by Metropolitan. And Metropolitan wanted a price for the wheeling that, when you added it to the price they were paying for the water, was more than what they could buy the water from Metropolitan for. So you had this beautiful deal, just it was going to cost you significantly more money than if you went forward and bought the water from Metropolitan. So you look at it, and probably the best thing about the San Diego deal is it all of a sudden gave Imperial an incentive to try to resolve its issues with Coachella. They had the possibility of getting $5 billion over the 75-year period. So they thought that was really a good deal, and they were willing to talk about some sort of a deal with Coachella. So we had that. San Diego was well connected with the Wilson administration, as he had been mayor in San Diego. And they got Dave Kennedy, the director of water resources, assigned to act as a facilitator and see what could be done. And so we started on a series of endless meetings. Most of them in the beginning were Met and San Diego yelling at each other over who could use their aqueduct and what the law said on that. In the summer of '98, Metropolitan and San Diego reached agreement on to settle the wheeling issues. Similar to a lot of settlements that get done, you need a third party to come in and help. And the state came in with $235 million to help defray the cost difference so that San Diego could pay what they wanted and Metropolitan could get, in effect, what they wanted. The money was to be used to line the Coachella and All-American canals and for some conjunctive use programs. So at that point, things got serious. Bruce Babbitt assigned David Hayes, who was Assistant Secretary and later Deputy Secretary of Interior, and to the task, and we traveled all over the West and Washington, D.C. for meetings that seemed to go on endlessly to resolve the issue. It was interesting. The IID team was controlled by their attorneys, that's my opinion, and they, at one meeting in Keystone, Colorado, Hayes kicked the attorneys out of the room. We quickly came to agreement on the issues, and within 24 hours, the IID board members who had been in the room with us distanced themselves from that settlement, and we went back to more negotiations. In spring of 1999, Metropolitan got a new general manager, and the negotiations took a turn for the better. Metropolitan wanted a deal. The negotiations continued through the summer, and in October of 1999, the parties reached agreement on a complex deal. And you have no idea how complex the deal is. But essentially, everybody got what I describe as 70% of what they wanted. No one got everything, but somebody got something that they wanted, and we wanted different things, so it was possible to make a deal. IID got the ability to transfer 200,000 acre-feet of water to San Diego, but they had to accept a cap on their water supply. IID got protection against the waste of water issues for 20 years while they implement conservation. San Diego got its 200,000 acre-feet of water and the ability to wheel it. Metropolitan got the water from the canal lining and the ability to do future transfers without Coachella and IID's objections. They also got water from a creative use of the reservoirs. We created something called domestic surplus, and that water could only go to the urban areas in California, Nevada, and Arizona. So that was water that they got for no cost, and the other basin states agreed to it in order to give California a soft landing. People in other basin states think that California is a monolith and our congressional delegation votes as one, instead of realizing that we're the Keystone Cops and that we can't do anything together, and that they have actually more power than we do. But they agreed to give us a soft landing for 15 years in there. Coachella got 456,000 acre-feet of water to solve its overdraft, and we had to pay money for some of it in the range of $50 to $83, significantly below the $250 that IID or that San Diego was paying. The negotiators signed the deal in the middle of the night. We were exhausted. We'd been negotiating for several days. And we went back, we got our boards to approve the deal, and then the hard work started. The attorneys had to prepare agreements, and we finally have signed 30 of them in there, and none of them are simple and straightforward agreements. We had to do environmental documents in there. And so we spent 4 years trying to complete the deal. We had to get the basin states to agree to the interim surplus guidelines. We were able to do that, and Bruce Babbitt signed them just days before he left office in 2001. Unfortunately, as we went through the process, we had two changes. We had the environmental documents indicating that the Salton Sea was not the sink that people thought it was, but it was a jewel of environmental benefits. It has tremendous bird populations. It has the second most diverse bird population in the United States. It has tens of thousands of birds there, many of them endangered. So under the law, we had to figure out how we mitigated for those. And when you do transfers where you're taking water through conservation, you reduce the amount of water running into the Salton Sea, you cause it to go down in level, and you cause the salinity to go up, and you impact the fishery. And when you impact the fishery, you create problems under the Endangered Species Act. So all of a sudden we had a new problem there. In addition, we had a new administration at the federal level, and so we had to deal with people who wondered what had Bruce Babbitt and David Hayes done. So we had Bennett Rayleigh, Assistant Secretary for Water and Science, assigned to work on the QSA. We started working through the issues. And the problem with the Salton Sea is we had to come up with a program that would have water flowing into the Salton Sea for the same 15-year period until the salinity would get up high enough that the fishery would die on its own. So we were forced to go out and restructure the deal. The easy way to restructure the deal was to go to land fallowing. The farmers make money doing it because the rent they get in effect by not farming is greater than what they make in farming. They can actually afford, if they're growing alfalfa, they could pay all their workers, pay all their subcontractors, buy the seed, buy the water, just not apply it to the land, and still make more money than they make growing alfalfa. So but the people in the Imperial Valley are different. It's a small town atmosphere. The Anglos that have been there for generations. The population is about 70% Hispanic in there, and you have very large farms and few farmers, about 400 farmers farming about 450,000 acres of land, and a lot of absentee owners. And so there's a lot of distrust in there, and that distrust was increased by the Bass brothers in there. So we then had to restructure the deal, but the people were concerned about fallowing. We had to go before the State Water Resources Control Board. As part of that process, the state board and state legislation set requirements that said you have to protect the sea for 15 years in order to get some needed legislation that would allow us to go forward. In order to rebalance the deal, Bob Hertzberg, who was Speaker Emeritus of the California Assembly, took on the thankless task. And so in the summer of 2000 and fall of 2000, he had numerous meetings and we restructured the deal. IID got a little more money. San Diego and Coachella got a little less water in the beginning in there. And the state came in and offered to help us by putting up money to address environmental problems by giving us money from Prop 50, a bond issue that passed last year, and we had hoped to get about $200 million out of that. So we all, again, late at night, signed another deal, went home. The three agencies got their boards to approve it. The attorneys redrafted the documents, and we're going nicely down the path. The Metropolitan, San Diego, and Coachella's boards approved it in mid-December. IID delayed their approval until December 31. My board met at about 2 o'clock on December 31 in case there were some changes that they had to do. We didn't have any changes. After 5 o'clock on the 31st, IID faxed a whole different document than what we had agreed to, and they had a number of changes in it that were such that we'd already rejected. And you wonder why I talk about December 31. We thought when we did the interim surplus guidelines that we would be done by December 2001. So we gave ourselves a pad in there of a year. And that pad was included in the interim surplus guidelines and in state legislation. They vanished on December 31, 2002 if we had not signed the documents. Well, we didn't sign the documents. On January 1, Interior implemented a change to IID's water order that they had announced earlier, and that was to cut IID by about 300,000 acre feet for wasting water. IID sued and got a preliminary injunction from the court based on Interior not following their procedures. So what happened then is Coachella and Metropolitan got cut by the same 300,000 acre feet, so California would be at 4.4. We then But the judge directed Interior to go back and do their process right. And so they went back through their process and in the summer announced that they were cutting IID again by about 300,000 acre-feet of water. That didn't set well with Imperial, but it did provide an incentive for the Imperial directors to get a little more interested in a settlement, because they knew ultimately they would be lose their arguments in the court and that they would be cut and they would have to conserve water on their own nickel. Well, the Governor Davis got involved in the process. He directed Richard Katz, who was a former assemblyman and a member of the state board, to resolve the issue. The world had changed. We ended up with the environmentalists who we had educated the year before telling us that they no longer would accept the deal they had agreed to, and we had to put up $163 million for environmental mitigation. That we weren't having to put up before. We lost the Prop 50 money because our friends in the water business said, we want that money for other projects, and we ended up not getting that and having to put up money. The state did agree to backfill if we went over the $163 million in there. Deal was struck. We spent September and early October trying to put the deal together, and last Friday, a day after we thought we were going to do it, we signed 30 documents that have basically restructured California's water use on the Colorado River. And so with that, we've done what our forefathers did. We put the arguments off for hopefully another 35, 45, or 75 years in there. And that if we're successful, your grandkids can come back and hear a lecture on how they solved the problem in the future. Thank you.
We have time for questions.
With the water being circumscribed in the basin, how was it and when was it that water was permitted to be tunneled through the Rockies into the eastern, in Colorado?
I would suspect that that was probably in the 19-teens that it was done. And you could develop water and put it to reasonable beneficial use. So Denver did that. But when you look at the amount of water they took compared to what Colorado has to use, it was not a significant amount. One of the interesting things I think in the water business is in the first, let's say, half of the 20th century, great water projects were built. And the only one people really think about is the Owens Valley, but you had Hetch Hetchy, the San Francisco system, the East Bay mud system, the system for New York City, Denver, and people built these, and today they would be unbuildable. Yeah?
The whole process described sounds like a huge swap meet. Was there a rational way that you could just stand on top of this and say, here's the rational way to make these decisions? And not, how would you do it?
The problem with rational ways, I tell people, we always got agreements without any problems as long as we didn't invite one of the parties to the meetings in there. Really, the problem you have is it's not just the people in the room, but you have the greater communities in each of the areas that have different ideas and different concerns. You have the environmental community, you have the Indian tribes, a whole bunch of parties there, the Endangered Species Act, and so it's very difficult in there. We probably would have never come together if it wasn't for that $5 billion carrot out there. Are there better ways to do it? I think so. I've been involved in a couple. Monterey, the Monterey Amendment on the State Water Project is one, which we did in '92, and we're redoing the environmental document as we speak because the courts decided it was inadequate.
There's no reason for any party not to just want more. There's no incentive for them not to. Is there any way to set up some system that everybody doesn't just want more?
Well, everybody in the water business, you have to, doing anything. When you go buy a car, the car salesman doesn't give you his lowest price right off the bat. He wants, if he can sell it to you for more, he wants it. The water business at times is not much different. It's the used water business. People like to sell paper water, and I've seen some great transactions in the West that are just paper water. There's nothing wet about it, but money changes hands.
Thinking about the Monterey Agreement, which a court had a perspective on paper water that that there is this thing called public trust, and you didn't talk about that at all. In which the state actually has a duty to all the public, not to just a few people who can get themselves around these tables.
Yeah, and invite me back sometime and I'll talk for a couple hours on my opinion of public trust. And give me Joe Sachs as my opponent. Public trust is something, I'll say, created out of whole cloth and has benefits for people in there, but probably isn't the best way of dealing with issues. The Salton Sea, for example,
It was there before.
Yeah. I know. At Runnymede, they said, and the public trust. I understand the concepts, but I'm just saying, in today's world, we need to figure out how to rationally address water issues, environmental issues, and public resource issues, I think. And I'm not sure doing it the way we do today, which is if I can find a law to stop you, I can get some bargaining leverage. We need a more rational method. And I'm not sure what the best method is, but I do think we could get better decisions if you could do it in a rational way rather than, I've spent 15 years fighting the Colorado River issues to get a settlement in there. And I know that we'll be in court within the next month on the settlement that we just signed in there. Hopefully we'll win. Let me get...
Who was the congressman from the Central Valley that you mentioned earlier?
Chuck Pasegian in there. I think I'm off on his name. Smoked a big cigar. Yeah.
See, my crude way of looking at this, I understand that there are limited resources available to Southern California and that the rate of growth of Southern California is such that it will outstrip those. But what's your projection for the future? Where will the water come from?
Well, I am an optimist. I think there is a tremendous amount of water available in California. The only issue is price. Okay? The top end price today is about $800 an acre foot. For $800 an acre foot, I can go desalt ocean water. And it's, if we can get through public trust, environmental issues and other things, it's more water than we'll need. And at $800 an acre foot, you'll see water conservation being more accepted in there. You may take out some of your lawn. So there's water available. It's what price do you pay and who do you hurt? The biggest problem with water transfers is most people are trying to transfer more water than they have a legal right to. And so they're harming somebody at some point in the process, or have the potential, whether that somebody is another farmer, an urban area, or the environment. And you have to figure out how you address those things. And we'll do it, and until we come up with a better way, it'll be arm wrestling, long negotiations, and lawsuits. Yeah?
What's the current situation regarding Mexico's rights?
Mexico has the finest rights in the world. They have a treaty, they have a treaty for 1.5 million acre-feet of water, and they have the ability to take another 200,000 acre-feet if it's excess to the United States needs. The problem we have is they have the same problems in Mexico that we have in the United States. You have Tijuana, which is growing rapidly. You have Mexicali, which is a city of over 1 million people, and they need water. Metropolitan Water District next year, is going to deliver water to Tijuana through their Colorado River Aqueduct in San Diego, because they don't have enough water. They need to move water across. They have an aqueduct that moves it across to do it, but they need to make it bigger. So they're having the battles down there of the same type, and you then throw on to it the United States nonprofits who have discovered the Colorado River Delta, and the fact that as a result of a fluke, and I always say no good deed goes unpunished. As part of the Colorado River Salinity Act, and to get better quality water to Mexico, we diverted water in Arizona around and dumped it down in a dry spot in Mexico, in Laguna Salada. And about 100,000 acre-feet of water a year goes down there of brackish water, 2,000 to 3,000 part water. Well, this water is really good to grow plants. I mean, the vegetation, nothing that you'd eat, but the vegetation's grown up. It's built a tremendous wildlife area down there, and they're doing fine. Well, under the plan, that water is supposed to be desalted, and we're supposed to send the brine stream down to Laguna Salada. Now, how many people in this room think that that's going to happen? Even though Congress passed the law to say it's going to happen. I'm willing to bet it's going to be a long time. In addition to that, there are people who want more water to go to Mexico for environmental purposes. My position, which isn't tremendously popular in Mexico, is they're allowed to do whatever they want with their 1.5 million acre-feet. They have to make the same decisions that we have to make. Do we use it for the environment? Do we use it for farming? Or do we use it for people? I think there was another, yeah.
Just curious, Colorado River capped, the state continuing to grow. Look at your crystal ball. What do you think the big battles, water battles over here, the big changes in water use in California over, say, 20 years or so?
Well, I think there will be three things. I think you'll see more desal done. I think you'll see more transfers from ag to urban. And I think you will see a rational north-south Bay Delta policy that will not be driven by anything that's in process today, but will be driven by global warming. And the fact that we're going to see tremendous changes in this state as a result of global warming. We're going to get, let's say, the same amount of water, but it's going to come down as liquid water instead of snowpack. Everybody thinks the big reservoirs we have are where we store our water. In California, we store it as snowpack. And when you don't have that snowpack, you're going to have very high peaks coming down the rivers. You're going to have flooding around there. You're going to wipe out the levee system in the delta. I was talking to a gentleman earlier who was saying the Salton Sea is such that you can't sustain it. Well, you have one here called the Delta. You're trying to keep the ocean out when the water levels are going up while you're built on peat moss. You're going to have that problem, and it's going to have to be solved. It'll be solved the same way that East Bay Mud is proposing to solve the problem, their problem today. They're building a peripheral canal. There'll probably be another one built in order to meet the needs. That's not popular, but fortunately, I'm now retired, independently wealthy. I work for the Bass Brothers, and I can say opinions I couldn't say before. Yes? We tried that. We had a great plan. It was a North American water plan. I have a friend here from Bechtel, and they were one of the lead proponents on it. They were going to build a system that took water from Canada, took it down the east side of the Rockies, brought it across, dumped it in the Colorado River, and along with a bunch of other places. And in today's environmental setting, I don't think you could do it. I'm not sure price-wise you could have ever done it, but even if you had a printing press, I don't think you could get the environmental clearances to do it.
I have a...
Yeah.
You said global warming. As part of the global warming, it's true that we may have some very wet years, we may lose the snowpack. But there's also a possibility that we may have long periods of drought. Droughts which span more than 20 years, 30 years. California's history, the last medieval times, they had a 100-year drought. Mm-hmm. And so when these things happen, then there is the other problem that in the Imperial Valley, because of high irrigation, we just talked about application of water as if it can go on forever. But we are going to have salinization, accumulation of salts in the soil one way or the other. And that is going to be a long-term problem. Because it is a depression.
Yeah.
Anything that you apply, water goes up in smoke, then something is going to remain there.
Yeah. And in the Imperial and Coachella Valleys, we farm differently than any place in the world. We have tile drainage systems for the very reason that if you take water, and Colorado River water, no place else in the world would anyone use it for farming. It has about a ton of salt in every acre foot of water. So we divert in rough numbers, 3.5 million acre feet of water into the Imperial and Coachella Valleys. That's 3.5 million tons of salt coming in every year. You have to leach out, apply extra water, and get those salts out, or you might as well take a salt shaker and go pour it on the plant, and the plant dies. So we've been doing that for years.
But still, that is why you get all that million tons or 3 million tons up in the Salton Sea.
And the
conservation has to get you.
Well, the thing that we did, we needed a place to put that water. Where did we put it? In a dry lake bed. That's now the Salton Sea. That's this tremendous wildlife area. So, as I said, no good deed goes unpunished. Now we're having to pay for it. Global warming, you talk about droughts. If you go look on the Colorado at the tree ring studies, there's a period of, as you said, 100 years where we've had low, significantly lower rainfall. We know at some point we'll see something like that come back. And that's one of the advantages of having some storage. It'll help us get through it. If you look at the Colorado River today, Lake Mead and is down lower than it's been. Storage on the Colorado River system is lower than what it's been since they started filling Glen Canyon Dam. And that was done in the 1960s. So are we starting into a new drought? I hope not. I hope to go skiing this year. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you again. Thank you.